From his international success with Men at Work through 13 solo albums, singer-songwriter and raconteur Colin Hay has had a remarkable career. Colin, welcome to the Australian Music Vault.
Thank you very much.
Now, we're going to cover as much as we can of your career in 45 minutes. Let's go back to the start. Born in Scotland, arriving in Australia as a 14-year-old. What do you remember about the Australian music scene?
The Australian music scene. Well, when I was 14, I wasn't particularly aware of the Australian music scene at that time. I was more listening to the radio.
Right.
It's like everyone else. So we came to Australia in 1967, and on my mother's birthday, actually. And Sgt. Pepper's came out. Sgt. Pepper came out in 67. So that was like the two biggest things that happened. I mean, I imagine they happened to me, they happened to everybody, but that was a fantastic record, obviously. And things like Light My Fire were on the radio by the Doors, and so I was listening to the radio. I wasn't really particularly aware of, and the Seekers were the band that I remember hearing. And I liked their songs. And then when I worked in the record centre in the city, because we had a music shop in Scotland, and in the holidays I would work. My mother and father said, well, you need to work, so I would go out and get a job and worked. The band that I remember listening to that I thought were fantastic Australian band was Daddy Cool.
Yeah. And
they were managed by a guy called John McDonald,
yes.
I think was his name. He managed them. And so they were fantastic. And then I started to go out and I realized that they were different. I would go and see, I would go to this place called Stonehenge in Beaumaris, and I would see Max Merritt, people like that. And I thought it was pretty vibrant. I thought it was quite exciting, musically. So there were lots of good musicians around at that particular time. So I would go there and see bands because that was the closest place to, it was where I lived,
Yeah.
And then I got involved in this folk club that started in Beaumaris, the Beaumaris Folk Club, and they would have interesting people playing. Danny Spooner and I got involved and then
Paul Wookie, do you remember him?
Mm-hmm. And what was the name of the famous folk club in the city?
Well, there was 1C1.
There's another one earlier on. It was called...
what was it?
I'll think of it.
The Green Man, perhaps?
No,
there was
it
one
was
in
right
Burwood.
in the city, and it was a famous one. It was called... I can't remember.
Yeah.
That's terrible. I wish I could remember that. But I played there once or twice, so I became aware of string music. Like solo, like acoustic string, people playing fingerstyle guitar, which I loved, and that's where I first became, people like started listening to, it was a John Martin, Nick Drake effect,
and all that sort of stuff. So your first performance, was that maybe at one of these coffee shops?
It was the Beaumaris Folk Club, was where I first started to play live.
Tell us about that performance.
Oh, I don't remember. I remember playing Beatles covers and I wasn't really playing folk music, but I was playing my versions of James Taylor, Cat Stevens, the Beatles, all those kind of bands, and I remember seeing a real folk artist come along. Was his name Peter Martin? Maybe I think his name was. He played a beautiful Martin guitar.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that's interesting because he wasn't just strumming the chords.
He was picking.
And it was like, it was, beauty and different tunings, the Martin Carthy effect from England.
And what was it about the singer-songwriter? Was there something about the singer-songwriter that drew you in?
Yeah, I think that what that did was that it connected me with my past. It connected me with Britain because I'd left there and I would come to this new place, but there was this yearning, if you like, or a kind of you go through this. I mean, I was home, you're young, and so you're somewhere else and you adapt. You change your accent to speak like an Australian bloke just to assimilate, you know what I mean? All that stuff. I had 2 accents growing up. I'd be with my parents, I'd speak like this, then I'd go out in the street and speak like that. just to get by,
Wow.
to not get into fights. I'd go back home, "Hey, doing all right?" And it wasn't a conscious thing.
Yeah.
And then when I left here, the Australian accent just disappeared, and it never came back.
Wow. Were you aware of that sort of, for want of a better term, the Scottish mafia? You know, there was the Bon Scott, and there was the Cold Chisel and Swanee, and I suppose in a way the Easy Beats, not necessarily Scotland, but the UK. Were you aware of those artists in Australia?
Yeah, I was aware of the fact that they were Scottish and they were transplanted to Australia, but that was really they were really Sydney based.
True.
And I was in Melbourne, and so it was a different thing. I was hanging out with mainly Australian people, you know,
Yeah.
or you know, people who'd been here since longer than last Tuesday.
Yeah.
And yeah, I became you know, aware more and more. You know, AC/DC would play here, and you'd go, "Oh, that's an Australian band," but they're actually it's street Scottish, really.
Was there a sense of pride?
Yeah, I mean, pride from both countries.
Yeah.
You know, I had a different experience from a lot of people when I came here, because I didn't go to the hostels. You know, my father and mother had saved up, like they had a music shop in Scotland for 10 years. They worked ridiculously hard for. I can remember them. Just my father. He had 3 jobs. He was a piano tuner in the shop, and he was going out selling pianos around the country. And so he worked for like maybe 10 years in solid, and he ended up with they ended up having in their pocket to come to Australia quite a lot of money. You know, they had like almost $10,000.
Wow.
And now in 1967, that was a lot of money.
Yeah.
So we didn't have to go to the hostels, which was probably a great breeding ground for people that played
Yes.
music. But from what I can tell, they were awfully terribly depressing places.
Of course.
And so that would greatly affect your attitude
Yeah.
towards when you first arrive here.
Yeah.
So I came here to the leafy suburb of Beaumaris, you know,
Yeah.
and not because we knew anything about that at all. We just there were some Scottish people that my mother and father knew who lived there, so that's where we went. It was just chance.
And you were by the beach.
By the beach. And so that's
It
where
was
I went.
sunny.
That's where I went to school, and then that's where I had a band called Deep Impression, which we left no impression really at all. But
Tell us about Deep Impression. Who was in the band?
there was a guy called Peter May on drums, and Paul Boxic, who I went to school with. He was an Italian guy. He was Italian Australian, first generation Italian. He looked like Elvis. He was my first hero, really. And
Were
there
you
was a
playing
couple of
originals
well, we played some originals, yeah.
that were your songs?
Yeah, and I only know that because I played recently, or a few years ago, down in Mooraduck. There was a pub down there that I played there, and the old band came along to see me
Really?
play. Peter May and Paul Boxic came along. And Peter told me that we used to play my songs, but I'd forgotten. I had no idea that we played our songs.
Could you name them?
No, I can't remember any of them.
So what was the first song that you wrote that you felt very, very satisfied with?
Well, that's an interesting question. Only because there was a lot of songs that I wrote that I thought were good at the time, and they just fell by the wayside.
Can you see why they fell by the wayside?
Yeah, they weren't very good.
So what was the first song that was really good?
I think the first song that I think was really good was Who Can It Be Now?
Yeah.
Because I remember writing that up in Bermagui with my girlfriend at the time, whose name was Linda. And I wrote it in about 40 minutes, and she said to me, "That's going to be your first hit record." And I said, "You think so?" She said, "Yeah, that's a good song."
And what was it about it, do you
I think it was just it sounded like a pop song because it had hooks and it had a melody, it had a memorable melody line.
You founded Men at Work in 1978 with Jerry Spicer and Ron Strykert.
Well, it's 1979 actually. By the time Jerry joined us, I mean Ron was really the guy. The other guy, I met Ron and creative lights went off in my head, yeah, because he was Very inspiring guy to work with.
Where did you meet him?
I met him in West Melbourne at somebody's backyard. I think it was might have been a guy called Phil Dagg, I think his name was, who's no longer with us, I believe.
Right.
But Ron was sitting out the back and he was playing this Ovation 12-string guitar. Beautiful, beautiful sound came out, and he was really good, a really good guitar player. And so he was very inspiring. So I was going off to Adelaide to be in this musical called Ned Kelly. I'd got a job in the chorus, the male chorus, in the theatre. And so I said to Ron, and this was in 77, I said to Ron, when I come back, you and I will work together. And he said, yeah, all right. And he was a man of few words, you know. And so I came back and I found him, and we started working together as an acoustic duo in the 78.
Okay.
And so we wrote a few songs. We didn't really write that many songs together, but he used to give me wee tapes of lovely ideas.
Melodies and riffs.
Ideas. And he gave me one, and it was just like a and it was really, it was hypnotic. And I remember driving down Power Street in Hawthorne, and I had this melody, and I'd had this phrase in my head for a few weeks, which was living in a land down under. So I just kept on singing this, land down under, and living in a land. And I thought, oh, that's something, you know, that's something. So I went home, and the next day, the whole tune just popped out. And so that was how we kind of worked, where he would have these little things that he would give to me, and then they would fire off something in my head, and the song would come out of it. So that was what happened with Down Under. So
just melody. What about the rest of the lyric?
Lyric, I wrote lyric. Yeah.
Around that time?
Yeah, say it the next day.
Right, so the Friday Out Combi, the Vegemite.
Yeah, it all came out just the one day, the day after, and the chords and the chord and the structure. But it had come from that little tape that he gave me, the little percussive pen.
Yeah. And did you know when you'd written that one that it would be? Well,
we liked the song. We thought it was a good song, and we used to play it at the Cricketers' Arms before Men at Work existed. And I remember playing it one Thursday. We used to throw in some original songs, and that was one of them.
Oh, so mostly covers?
Yeah, mostly covers during 78, half and half.
Ah, what were the covers?
Oh, we would do Ry Cooder, we would play John Martin, we would play different things like that, and Beatles and whatever we felt like playing. Joni Mitchell now and again.
Are you Men at Work at this stage?
No,
Men
at Work was
just
me and Ron. It wasn't Men at Work. It was just Colin Hay and Ron Strykert.
Okay.
I think it was, I don't even know what we called ourselves.
So you threw that in?
Yeah, we threw that in one Thursday, and then the next week this guy came up and he said, mate, play that song you played last week, mate. Something about Down Under. He goes, it's a good song, that'll do well. And so we got a request for it the next week, so we thought, we thought, oh, that's good. But I always felt like a good song. And then, so we were together for about a year, and I'd met Jerry at university. And so we figured that there was nobody giving record deals to acoustic duos, and so we thought, well, it'd be nice to put a band together,
Yeah.
So Jerry came and joined Ron and I, and so that became a trio. And then I knew Greg for years through Kim Gingell, and Greg was sitting at home. I said, come and play. He was just almost finished a music degree. So he came and joined us, and then Ron used to play bass, and Ron switched to guitar, and Jerry brought in John Reese. It was Jerry's friend. So he brought him in. So in the course of between June and September, October of 79, then it was the 5 people. And I asked my old friend Russell Depler, who I met at university, to 1976. He said to me, oh, if you ever get a band together, Carl, he goes, I'll hustle for you. And that was the basis of our deal. So I said, well, come and manage the band. So he was the son of a sheep farmer, so he came and managed the band. So it was 6 of us, five musicians and 1 manager.
And did he know anything about managing?
Nothing. No, nothing.
Was he a good manager?
Well, I think that he was, and that was another, kind of point of contention between what happened with the band, which, the reasons why bands break up is fairly tedious. I mean, it becomes very Spinal Tap very quickly. But if I can sum it up in a kind of nutshell, was that Russell was my friend, I brought him in to manage the band. We became world famous. We were number one. We were selling millions of records around the world. We were probably the number one band in the world at that particular time. Yeah. Jerry thought that he wanted to sack Russell because he said he wasn't a good manager, and so that set up basically one of those survivor things, like you're one of those.
Who's with who?
Yeah, what do you call those? There were two different
divide
camps.
and conquer.
It was really awful in a way, where we should have been riding the high of being this number one band in the world, and there was two people in the band that didn't like the manager, wanted to either put him on a wage or sack him, And so I felt conflicted because I thought, well, we should resolve this. But then I got upset because someone was trying to basically sack Russell. I don't want to sack Russell,
No, he was your mate.
Yeah,
and he'd done a pretty good job.
Yeah, well, the thing is that everyone played their role. It's difficult to know, who did what. Was this person really important? A little bit important? I knew what I'd done. I'd come up with all the songs, or most of the songs, sang the songs, played the songs. I knew what I brought to it.
Yes.
I kind of knew what Russell brought to it. And I kind of knew what the other people. It was very much a 5-piece band. Music. The music was really 5 of us, but then it became very Spinal Tap, where Jerry brought his sister in to manage him, and I thought, this is just stupid. It's dumb. Yeah. It's as dumb as you can get. And so I thought, well, it's over. It's pretty much over, and it really was. By the time the big American tour finished in the end of '83, it was done. That particular group of people, which was sad in a way, but then again, I think about it now and I think it just wasn't one of those bands that was destined to go the distance, And when it was over and when I ended up on my own, I felt very relieved and I felt very happy, and I could just move on and kind of do what I wanted to do.
And liberating.
Absolutely.
I imagine.
Yeah.
Let's go back a little while the band was still happening. Did you feel part of the Australian pub rock scene?
No, we didn't really feel part of any scene, really. We were, I wouldn't say we were ostracized, but people didn't really kind of know who we were. We didn't really know how to negotiate the world of the music business in a way, with going through agencies and I mean, we had friends, we knew other bands, I'd go and see other bands, but we just kind of started off, and again, because Russell didn't really have any experience as a rock manager, we just did what we felt was good for us.
And it worked.
And I think that, it's fair to say that we were kind of quite, we were quite resented by a lot of the music industry because we became so successful and people just probably thought that it was, perhaps somewhat undeserved because we hadn't gone through the normal channels of what a band does, in the Australian music industry. So we were kind of, we didn't feel upset about anybody else. We weren't trying to do that. We were just kind of going, oh well, this feels like the right thing to do,
But were you touring with other acts? And presumably you were on bills. Did you do?
Yeah, we would.
Like Bombay Rock? What were the pubs that were happening at that time?
Yeah, our success was really based on the live following we got, because we would we'd play the Cricketers' Arms to start with, which was a free gig.
Yeah.
People would come. That got too small for us, so we moved up into another pub, and then audiences just started to come. So the reason why the agents and promoters took notice of us was simply because of the fact that we were attracting a big live audience. So we started to play at the Armadale Hotel, which was a bigger room, but it was always based on the fact that we attracted a really strong live audience. We did things that we opened up for Midnight Oil in Sydney, and we opened up for Cold Chisel a couple of times, and that was exciting. And then we just went, and took off when Who Can It Be? We got a deal for a single. We made Who Can It Be Now, and that went to number 2, and so that was what was our gateway to success, if you like.
How did the Midnight Oil audience respond to you?
The Midnight Oil audience liked us.
Oh, good.
Yeah, liked us.
Because they could be pretty feral.
Yeah, they liked us.
Chisel?
Yeah, I mean, we used to play. We were a pretty powerful unit back then. You know, we were, and also we were quite upstarty in the sense that, you know, we didn't really care who we were going on before.
Right.
You know, it was gonna be hard to follow us, and it was hard to follow us because we were very, very good.
Yeah.
You know, by that time we were playing the songs. We felt confident with the songs. Songs were strong. We had a very interesting sound. We had interesting instrumentation, and at that point we kind of pretty much, you know, took no prisoners.
And a hallmark of your solo shows, I've always thought, is your relationship with the audience, your storytelling, your yarning. Was that creeping in, or did that begin with the Men at Work shows? Was there a bit of chat from you?
Not really. No, it was pretty much just big black boxes and playing the music. But the telling stories came really out of circumstance rather than design. Because when Men at Work broke up, and especially when I came back to Melbourne in 1988. And put a little small acoustic band together, and I would play places like Madigan's up in Brunswick.
Yeah.
And it was a lovely room. But what I noticed was I was playing to nobody. You know, the band, I'd played to 150,000 people. A few short years before that, the band is gone. I still got a record deal with Columbia Records. But I would play, and sometimes maybe 8 people would come to Madigan's.
And how was that for you emotionally?
It was difficult, you know. And I was drinking a lot then, and I used to love to drink and get really messed up.
Before a gig?
No. But so I was kind of trying to figure out why that was the case, and you know, it's probably kind of more of a complicated issue to even go into in the time we've got, but I found it very curious being in Melbourne or being in Australia, because people were kind of aware of what we had done, but they didn't really understand it, or they didn't really want to understand it. It was so big that they kind of, in a sense, had to go the other way and pretend that nothing had happened. It was almost like people would sweep our success under the carpet in a way. Yeah.
Tall poppy syndrome?
Yeah, the tallest. The tallest, you know. And, I mean, that wasn't the reason that I left.
No.
But it didn't help. And it was part of the reason why I thought, well, I just want to go, I want to live somewhere where I feel appreciated and where I feel comfortable, you know. And I always felt people understood, like in the States, for example, they understood what a singer I was. Like they understood that I could sing, and they understood that I could write a song, and they understood that I could play, and that was a given, you know. And I felt good about the fact that at least people weren't going, "Oh, what are you doing now, man? What are you doing now?" You know, and all that stuff.
And they understand ambition too.
And they understand ambition, and they understand entertainment, you know. And so, but it wasn't like I really, I'm going to leave. I'm going to, you know, leave this place. It happened over a period of time where I thought, so okay, no one's really coming to see me. And then I would put out a record. And I remember going into Triple M, I think it was, or one of those commercial radio stations. And I'm sitting there, and I played a bit of guitar, and they like it because you go in and you're talking to them, and they're not going to play the new record. They're going to play something else. But you're giving them good radio. And before they went to a commercial break, one of them said, "Oh, we haven't even got any Men at Work in the system, Cole. We'll have to play a bit of Police. That's as close as we've got."
No.
Yeah. And I remember thinking, I think it might be time for me to leave. Yeah. You know. And I was getting divorced.
Right.
And I was having trouble with the drink.
Yeah.
And had a record deal that was based in Los Angeles.
Right.
So I thought, that's where I'll go.
Yeah. So that massive success in America.
Well, it wasn't, and also it was like everyone always said in America, this is the interesting thing. America was the last place to where we had success.
So Canada was first.
Yeah, and all over Europe, South America, it was like everywhere else. It was like one of those risk games where you know we surrounded America, and they had no choice really but to accept us. You know, what didn't really happen and it happened because of tenacity and Russell again. We went to New York and he camped in CBS offices and wouldn't leave until they gave him some promotion money. And
really,
he was really. They were like, they didn't understand it. They said that manager or man at work, he's still here. He won't leave. They said, well, give him an office. So they gave him an office.
No. Yeah. Brilliant.
Yeah, it was brilliant. It was funny.
Absolutely brilliant. I know James Black tells great stories about playing in South America with you and playing to enormous crowds. I mean, some of the audiences you played in front of.
I don't think Jimmy Black came to South America.
No, he went to somewhere
Japan.
Exotic.
He went to Japan, yeah, and that was the Men at Work that was really, it was me trying to prop something up that was done.
Yeah.
But Greg and I went back to we played in South America after 11 years of the band being over. We were in '96. Greg and I put a band together, and we went to all over South America, and we played maybe 17 shows to maybe 10, 15,000 people every night. And it's a lot of diminishing returns. We did that. We did it again. We did it over the course of 6 years. And we played all over the world. And it was fantastic. But after a while, you go, okay, well, unless you do something new, then you're just basically a nostalgia act, But
you and he were close.
Greg and I, yeah.
Mm-hmm. You had good relationships.
Yeah, very good.
The others were gone by then.
Yeah, it's not like I didn't have bad relationships. Well, Ron, Ron and I were very close, and then Ron decided that I had put some kind of spell on him, and he wasn't. It got very strange for quite a long time, It was very disturbing, to say the least.
Yeah.
Which saddened me a lot, but you can't really get. You can only get so upset about someone else's life. It's his life, and I really had nothing to do with his life at all. But he was really inspiring to me when we first met. I don't really think that Ron particularly liked Men at Work.
Really?
He liked what we did before Men at Work.
He liked it, the two-piece.
Yeah, he liked it when we were together, and he has stated so. That's what he liked. He liked that magic we had, because we did have that. And then when we became the band, we became very commercially successful, but it meant bringing in a producer who started rearranging songs and in a sense, in his mind, kind of messing with the music a bit, But it became very successful, and we made a couple of records that were strong, and then we were making the third record. I remember sitting in the studio out there in Warrandyte or wherever it was, and Ron said he just stood up and he goes, "Oh, I think I'm going to go home." I said, "Oh yeah." He said, "Yeah." I said, "You coming back?" And he goes, "Nah." That's how he left the band. He just went home and he never came back.
But did you follow up?
No. It got followed up. We found out that he would, in fact, he didn't want to have anything more to do with the band.
I did read.
It was funny, but it was so wrong,
Yeah. I did read a comment from you at one point. You said, a band is made up often of men with limited communication skills.
Yeah, that was definitely the case, I think. It was definitely the case in our band. I think it's the case in many bands. And I have great respect for bands that can even, turn whatever that tension is, like whether it's The Who or, there's all these bands that can manage to survive, the Rolling Stones or...
Stones, to Keith and Mick.
This tenuous, tense, terse, kind of volatile relationships over many, many years. But I had no desire. No. I had no desire to do that with this particular group of people. I just would rather be on my own. It wasn't interesting enough musically to really carry on with it.
Let's talk about some of the extracurricular activities, if you like. A little bit of TV work in America.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, not a lot. I mean, I'd like to do more, but it's one of those things.
Of course, Gary Shandling, that's the one.
Well, Gary Shandling was a huge high in my life. To get to do Larry Sanders
Sanders.
I mean, that was awesome. I was going on stage at Largo where I still play.
Yeah.
It's different, just a different room now. The room's moved, but
In LA.
yeah, it's called Largo at the Coronet now. It's a 300-seat theatre run by an Irish guy called Flanagan, who's my friend who I've known since I moved to LA.
Yeah.
But Shandling came along one night because somebody told him to come along and see my show because it had, bits in it, and I was walking on stage and he just grabbed me by the arm and he said, "I'm not gonna stay." I said, "Oh, great." I said, "Stay for 2 songs or something." He goes, "Okay." So he stayed the whole night. And at the end, he said, I walked off and I just heard him say, "I stayed." And they called me up a couple of days later and said, "I want you to be on my show." And I said, "I'd love to be on your show." They said, "On Friday." And it was like, I had to come to Australia. I had to fly.
No.
I said, "Oh, Gary," I said, I got to fly to Australia on Friday. And he went, "Oh, why?" And I said, "Well, I have to go on tour." He said, "How long?" And I said, 2 weeks. He goes, "I'll wait for you."
Wow.
So I got back. He said, and I called him, and he said, "Yeah." And so it was a particular. I had a song called "Can't Take This Town," which fitted in with the storyline where he was thinking of leaving because he couldn't deal with the bosses upstairs, the corporate bosses upstairs.
Yeah.
So it worked out really well, and each of those episodes was so tightly scripted, except our bit, which is bit where you're sitting on the sofa with him, you know. And I was called there hours before I had to do anything, and he kept on wandering into my dressing room, just saying, "What are we gonna do?" "Well, we'll be fine." And he walked out. So I was like, by the time it came around, I was so nervous because I thought nothing was scripted at all.
No.
So we had a live audience, and of course you do 15 or 20 minutes in front of the live audience, and they cut it down to 30 seconds for the show. But that was exhilarating.
I bet. Well, he trusted you.
He did, and we were funny, and it was a great 15 minutes because it was flying by the seat of our pants. There was nothing was scripted, and at the end he said, "Colin Hay," and I stood up, and he and the audience was clapping, and he whispered to me, he goes, "That was great." I said, "Oh, thanks." He goes, "You're funny," and then I said, "Thanks." He goes, "Yeah, fuck you."
Yeah. Have you done other those sort of Tonight shows?
I've done Letterman, and I did Jimmy's the Fallon show, and the other Jimmy, Jimmy.
How
Jimmy
are those
Kimmel.
experiences?
Lovely, I agree. Great. But the thing that's been really that's served me well in the last 20 or 25 years is going out on the road and play and finding my own audience, and they're out there. But it's been a lot of legwork, involved in that, and but it's been hugely rewarding to me.
But with little detours every now and again, for example, being part of the Ringo Starr band.
Ringo. Well, that was.
Did you know him? Did he know you?
No, he goes out to. Well, he used to. What he does is he goes out at that particular time, he would go out every year or every couple of years, and he would take a different band with him every time. And they just look for people who can still, string a sentence together and who can still play and who can still sing and have had hits.
Yes.
So they have lists of people that they would kind of look at and go, "Oh, what about this guy? What about this guy?" And somehow someone had given Ringo's guy, it's a different guy now, but at that particular time it was a guy, had given them my name, and so they called me up and they said, "Do you want to do this tour?" And of course, it takes about 1 second to go, "Well, I'm on the freeway," and I go, yes. And it's Ringo, top of the food chain.
Of course.
So yeah.
And so you're playing guitar. So you're part of.
I was playing guitar. Yeah. So you're part of it. You're basically part of a great cover band.
An ensemble, but you're a rhythm guitarist.
Yeah. Well, I played. I was the only guitar player in the first band, so I had to learn. I mean, I can play. I'm not known for my lead guitar playing, that's for sure. But I can play if pressed,
So
I can
you're
I
playing
can learn.
with a little help from my friends,
Yeah,
presumably?
and playing, Act
It Don't
Naturally
Come
and
Easy.
down, ticka, ticka, all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff,
all the sort of Carl Perkins.
Yeah, but the first song we played, the first song we rehearsed was a song called Never Without You, which was a song about George. And that was the first day that I met Ringo. I just met him on stage, and he's just standing there. And he said, oh, yeah, let's do Never Without You first, let's rehearse that. And that had an Eric Clapton solo in it, as the first. So I said to Ringo, I said, oh, that's great, boss. I said, the first song we're doing has got an Eric Clapton solo in it. That's terrific. And he goes, oh, don't worry, Colin. He goes, do your version of Eric's solo. It's cool, man. Just do your own solo. He goes, it'd be great. Just do your version of Eric's solo. It's cool, man. And so we do the song, and it comes to the solo, and I messed it up, something shocking, even to the point where he goes, whoa.
That was bad.
And then at the end of the song, Paul Carrick, who was playing the keyboards, he said, hey, he goes, don't worry, boss. He goes, Colin was just doing his version of Eric Idle's solo.
Oh.
So we were off to a good start.
Colin, how important do you think it is to preserve Australian history, this idea of the Australian music vault?
Well, I think it's really crucial to try and do this because, there's so much you can talk about. There are so many areas you can talk about. You can only really just scratch the surface of it. You could look at a certain number of years and just in Melbourne. You could look at the bands like the Dingoes, and you could look at bands like Chain. You could look at, there's just like Spectrum, Mike Rudd. There's particular people that just were massively, and still are massively talented, and never really got outside Australia.
No.
But should have, and could have, and had, world-class talent.
And were very, very influential.
Very, very influential, and in really making us, helping to make people who they are, who they were, who they are now, and giving this place an ever-changing but definable identity, even people who are, road crews and agents and managers, everyone that goes into putting a show together. There's so much love, and it's still not really understood particularly well by people.
Is there an Australian sound, do you think? Or a Melbourne sound?
I think there is, but it's difficult to talk about because it's often come from somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it gets churned around in this kind of, washing machine and spins around, and when it comes out, it sounds Australian.
Yeah.
But it has all these influences from everywhere else. One of the best examples I can think of is the band Chain. They would play a blues song. They'd play an American blues song, but the way they played it, it sounded different. It was like in Australia, it was like bop, 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 bop. It was like different. Instead of it had this kind of
Bump, which I suppose maybe is that pub rock.
Yeah.
I mean, who if you had to name, say, three.
And then Thorpe, of course. Thorpe was, some of the best days I had. I've been over there for a long time, and some of the best times I had, I would have Max Merritt and I would have Billy Thorpe sitting in my house on the deck and having a barbecue, and I would just go, come on, tell, and I would just go with them. I would bring this up or I'd bring that up, and I would just sit there, and I was very, very happy boy because I could just listen to them.
Would
talk
you bring
about
a
stuff.
guitar out and say, have a strum, or does that happen at your barbecues?
Yes, it does. It does.
Yeah.
Well, recently I've been recording Max. Max has got these great songs. Max lives down the road from me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And he's on dialysis, so I know he's not.
Yeah, he is, and he's beautiful. He's like such a beautiful guy. So anyway, he says, I got these songs, man. I go, well, come over. I have a studio in the basement. I said, come over, record a couple of songs. So he comes over, and he's got his old, I think it's a J50, J50 Gibson from the 60s, the one he's always had. So he opens it up, and I'm going, wow, and He goes, oh, yeah, that's the old one, mate. And I go, yeah. So he's going to play this song. And I said to him, are you okay playing with a click, Max? He goes, yeah, you should be all right, mate. Should be all right. And so I set up with just one, mic and the guitar and the voice. And I said, okay, just play the song down and we'll see how we go. So he plays the song. And I'm thinking to myself, at some point he'll maybe go off the click or he'll forget something or forget a word. So he plays the thing like straight through to the finish. Perfect. He goes, how was that, mate? How was that? And I turned around and I thought to myself, oh, that's right. You're one of those guys that can do that.
Yeah.
There's not many left.
Yeah.
So that's one reason
Yeah.
why you have to preserve everything you can about everything that we've gone through, is because those guys were pioneers, and you don't really get that anymore.
Thorpe, did you ever bring a guitar out with Billy Thorpe?
Yeah, Billy was always. I'd bring a guitar out and he'd go, "Oh yeah, mate, yeah, I've got one of them."
but he didn't want to play.
Yeah, he would play. He'd
Oh,
play
would
a
he?
little. Yeah, he'd mess around with it, But Billy was more. He was more into
On
having
the
a bit of a chat.
Yeah, good on the chat,
Yeah.
I reckon.
Yeah.
Top 3 influences, Australian artists. Like, who really inspired you?
Mike Rudd is one.
Yeah.
Mike Rudd, to me, when he had the Spectrum thing going, that was, and that song, the
I'll Be Gone.
I'll Be Gone was incredible. The Seekers,
Yeah.
I love the Seekers.
Really?
Yeah, they're great songs. I mean, you listen to the songs, you just get an acoustic guitar and you play
Yeah.
Georgia Gill and you think, now that's a song.
Yeah.
Or Morningtown Ride.
Yeah.
All those. I mean, but it was so innocent.
World of Our Own. I mean,
was-
that big 12-string
Yeah,
sound.
12-string sound.
Yeah.
And I did love Cold Chisel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's an obvious thing,
Yeah.
but they were, to me, almost like the perfect Australian band. Introspective songwriter,
Yes.
great rhythm section,
Yeah.
2 great singers, great guitar player,
Yeah.
and the Scottish singer.
Up
How
front.
can you beat that?
Now, I don't know about you, but I can hear music. Is that a sound check happening?
It's a sound check, and it's indeed my sound check. Well, I'm part of it. Yeah, it's my sound check, so I need
So
to
that's
go.
you got to go.
Yes. I'm
So
a
that's
very-
mental as anything. When are
quite-
you
quite-
sound checking?
whenever I like,
Right.
but probably after them, I would say. So I need to go. I'm a very, very, very busy man.
You go. Great.